It's crunch time at work and you need to bring wings to your workday. Visit redbull.com/gettingitdone and answer a couple questions about your work style to get a Spotify customized playlist tuned to your productivity. Plus, score a can of Red Bull on us while you go from to-do to done. And remember, Red Bull gives you wings. Supplies are limited. Terms apply. Visit the website for more information.
For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome. Today I'm joined by my politics team colleagues Kyle Ingram and Avi Bajpai. It is in those last few days of April. The General Assembly is back in session this week after they went on vacation for a week, but we didn't. We are still writing stories, and Kyle was in court for something that had to do with the legislature. If anyone remembers, Senate Bill 382 from the December override of former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper's veto. Kyle, what's the bill and why was it in court?
Yeah, so SB 382 was really the last big action of the GOP supermajority before they lost their supermajority by one seat in the 2024 elections. And this was a really big bill that was taking power away from the governor and giving it to the legislature. It's a common theme we've seen throughout different legislative sessions. And so it provoked several different lawsuits over its provisions, and the one that we were in court for dealt with the governor's election powers. So in North Carolina, the way our Board of Elections works and has worked for decades is that the governor is able to appoint a majority of members to the 5-member board. So that means that the governor usually appoints or has always appointed a majority of his own political party to the board. And the legislature has been not a fan of this ever since Cooper was elected in 2016. They really want Democrats to not be in control of that board. So they've made several attempts over the years to change this, either by having it as an even number board or putting Republicans in control some other way. And every time they've tried to do it, it's been struck down by courts or it was rejected by voters when it was put forth as a constitutional amendment.
I do feel like somebody asked Senate Leader Berger about this, and he's like, we tried this and we tried that, and they didn't like it.
Yeah. Well, so they tried something really new this time with SB 382, which was instead of giving the power to the legislature, they gave it to the state auditor to appoint members of the Board of Elections. And that was a position that had just been won by a Republican for the first time in 16 years, Dave Bullock. So if that law had been allowed to go into effect, Bullock would have gotten election powers on May 1st and taken control of the boards. But Governor Stein and former Governor Cooper sued over the bill, and it went to a 3-judge panel in Wake County Superior Court, and they ruled last week that the law was unconstitutional, at least in this provision. And so it is struck down for the moment, but the legislative leaders have already appealed this ruling. It's probably going to work its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. So we've probably got a long fight ahead.
I feel like we've seen this, repeatedly that's like when the election changes and a new governor, they did it to Cooper. And then I guess when he took office, and then later, while he was in office, some of the Cooper power about, emergency declarations and Council of State concurrence, that happened. That was in the budget, and that was over his COVID response. So that's one tactic, is to put it into a bill that the governor is going to have to agree at some point if you want the budget to become law or whatever else is in it. But court is always the other way, which I feel like has gone back with McCrory. Like how far back do you know? It was McCrory, I guess, at least. You said he, but I don't know if this happened under Perdue when she was governing.
Well, I don't know if there was as much jockeying about the specific election board appointments under McCrory, but there was still certainly fights over gubernatorial power and how much power he should have compared to the legislature. Mm-hmm. And I think what we're seeing now, based off of this ruling, is a really interesting conversation happening about what the role is of the Council of State compared to the governors. Because what the judges said, it was a split ruling, it was 2-1. And so the judges that ruled in Stein's favor said, this is a power that has to rest with the governor. The governor is the only one in the Constitution who is given the power to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. There are Council of State members. They are established by law, some of them by the Constitution, and they have their own special duties. But what the judges said was the voters have to have faith that the person they are voting for a Council of State position will have the powers and responsibilities that were assigned to them at the time of the election, and that they would be more or less thought of as having in their realm. Like no other state auditor in the country has election oversight powers.
So maybe, when people were voting and deciding between Dave Bullock, the Republican who won, and it was Jessica Holmes was the Democrat, right? I was trying to remember the incumbent who had taken over for Beth Wood to finish her term. And then they think, okay, well, the auditor, investigates this and that. And then after the election, oh, wait, the auditor does more than this. And Bullock is getting a lot more power, I guess, in other ways, too.
Yeah, certainly with the legislature really taking a fancy to him, it seems, and really stressing his role in doing, government efficiency work of the kind that we're seeing at the federal level, taking initiative on that. One thing that I think is interesting, Kyle, you mentioned that the judges who sided with Stein said that voters need to know that the people who they're voting for in an election, that those elected officials will have the powers that they had before the election, after the election as well. And it seems like that's something that's not just, under that kind of legal, ruling or, opinion from the judges. That also applies to what we saw with the Attorney General provisions in this bill. I would assume it also, applies to the superintendent of public instruction. Basically, the concept that, that's an argument we've seen Democrats make a lot now, but
because it wasn't just the governor that had powers taken away in
32. There's like different they gave to other council of state with the shifting. It sounds boring to be like, oh, it's who gets to appoint someone to a board.
It has big consequences.
Exactly. It depends on what the board is and what they do and what they oversee. Right?
I think fundamentally, it shows this, this argument I see this coming up in the courts, but also in the legislature, because Democrats make the same argument that people, North Carolina voted for Trump, but the state also voted for Josh Stein, for Jeff Jackson. But I think the caveat to all this is, as you're saying, this case is likely to go further and further up in the legal system, potentially to the North Carolina Supreme Court, and it'd be interesting to see what those justices make.
And that is important because that race is what's the latest in Riggs Griffin?
Okay, so the latest where it stands now in the contested Supreme Court election is that the Fourth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals has blocked the state from enforcing this cure period that the North Carolina Supreme Court designed. So that would have been this 30-day period where potentially thousands of voters would have had to prove their eligibility by showing an ID to election workers. That is on hold now while we figure out what the lower federal court is going to do. He's going to make a ruling on the merits of this case probably this week, I would think. And then we'll see if there's more appeals after that.
So what's the next step for the Board of Elections appointment lawsuit?
So it's going to be appealed to, it's already been appealed. So it'll go to the North Carolina Court of Appeals. It'll probably be heard by a 3-judge panel there. All of North Carolina's appellate courts are dominated by Republicans. We have partisan judicial elections here. So it'll likely be a Republican majority panel. And from there, I'm sure whoever loses will appeal to the Supreme Court as well.
Do we know any sort of timeline on that?
I don't know. The last time there was a fight over election board appointments, it was with Senate Bill 749 when they tried to make it an even one appointed by the legislature instead of by a Council of State member. And that legal battle actually dragged on for quite some time. I think it never even reached arguments at the Court of Appeals before the legislature just scrapped it and said, we're going to do 382 instead.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about what else is going on in North Carolina politics this week with all the legislative committees. As we're recording this on Monday, Rules has a lot of stuff, House Rules anyway, later in the day on Monday. So the House will be voting on a lot of things. And then our picks for Headliner of the Week. We'll be right back.
Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
So good, so good, so good. New spring arrivals are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Get ready to save big with up to 60% off Rag & Bone, Marc Jacobs, Free People, and more.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Because there's always something new.
Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with Avi Bajpai and Kyle Ingram. If you're listening to this Tuesday morning, it is going to be a busy voting week in the House, judging by what is in rules on Monday afternoon. This is just a variety pack of bills: moped regulation, POW/MIA flags on state buildings and schools, Home-Based Business Fairness Act, County Tier Designation Study Bill, allow concealed carry of a knife, revised child passenger restraint system law, filling vacancies on the Haywood County Board of Commissioners, retirement death benefits rewrite, the Hunter Robinson Act, the Care First Act. That's not even a fifth of the bills in rules and House rules on Monday. So we can expect those bills on the floor unless something changes. Today, as you're listening to this on Tuesday or Wednesday or even Thursday, what stands out to you all, Avi?
You just mentioned the Care First Act. That is notable. That's the House's kind of proposal to deal with healthcare costs and insofar as it pertains to prior authorization. So that is interesting to watch that moving forward, and then what happens with the Senate on that, and then Speaker Hall's Speaker Hall has a bill that would kind of revise HB 10 from last year and add an extra layer of notification that would be required for sheriffs to provide ICE with when they're holding someone that ICE has asked them to hold for 48 hours before they release that person. So that's an extension of something, a pretty big, very contested bill from last year that is in effect now. So that's something interesting to watch as well. That could be on the floor this week.
Kyle, what are you watching out for?
I'm interested. There's a bill coming up on AI regulations, which I think is so interesting because right now it sort of feels like AI is like the wild, wild west, and there's really no limits or restrictions or regulations or anything. So it's interesting to see the legislature go after that. And the bill that's in committee actually bears some resemblance to a bill that came up, I believe, in the Senate in the final days of the last legislative session. And that was looking at regulating AI use in political ads. So it would have been like, you have to put a disclaimer if you're using an AI generated depiction of somebody. And that didn't make it across the finish line. But this new AI regulation bill that will be in committee is much more broader. It's not dealing with just election advertising. It's dealing with like deep fakes and all of that kind of stuff in general. So
Is that House or Senate?
House. And it's a bipartisan as well.
As of now, it looks like the House has a busier week. But again, as we're recording this on Monday, the Senate might add to their committees later in the week, and there'll be plenty going on. I assume if Hall's coming back, this is the first time he'll be back since he became a dad.
I think that's right.
Oh, yeah.
His staff was saying that he probably would want to be here in person to present that ICE bill.
Mm-hmm.
So I think fair to expect him to be back this week.
Also, the House has a lot of work to do. This, as it'll be May by the end of the week. And the House says if they're, on track for their plan to release their version of the budget bill before Memorial Day. So that's a lot of work in the coming week. So the House budget chairs, I'm sure, will be busy with that. And, we'll see what happens with the Senate. The other thing to notice, to plug, if you haven't read yet, Avi and I did a story about the Senate budget. It's a budget story, but it's way more than that. And former Senate Democratic leader Dan Blue, who voted for the budget. We talked about it last week, that he and Senators Gladys Robinson and Senator Paul Lowe and Senator Joyce Waddell were the Democrats that all voted with Senate Republicans on the budget bill. Avi talked to Robinson and Lowe and Waddell about it. I talked to Blue and also current Senate Democratic leader Sidney Batch for a pretty thorough story. There's a lot of stuff in there, so y'all should take a look if you didn't read that this past Friday. All right, so let's move on to our picks for headliner of the week. Kyle, you want to go first?
So mine is that the News and Observer just announced our class of summer interns who will be coming to us pretty soon. Very excited to get to meet all of them. And we have a returning intern, Gabby Hartlob. So we're excited to see her again.
Yeah, Gabby was helped a lot with the podcast last summer. And I believe you heard her voice on at least one episode. So we'll look forward to her hopefully helping out again this year as she works with producer Laura Bajpai. Avi, who or what is your headliner of the week?
I'm going to go with something that Dawn actually covered in a newsletter on Sunday, which is the fact that FEMA recently last week decided not to extend the 100% reimbursement for Helene recovery. That was something that Governor Stein had been pushing, but it's a bipartisan thing, of course. And he wrote a letter to FEMA appealing that. So that's something I think that's going to be interesting to see that move forward.
Well, it's a cost share to be, more. His letter says, I respectfully urge you, he wrote this letter to Trump, to reconsider FEMA's regretful decision and extend our 100% cost share period for 6 months. Failing that, then for 3 months. Doing so would allow us to continue to build on the momentum you have helped us achieve, Stein said in his letter to Trump. Stein actually praised Trump for his first post-inauguration visit was to Asheville, and Stein met him at the airport and said that, he was glad that he was paying attention and debris removal was, one thing. But this is, a pretty solid quote from Senator Ralph Heist during the press conference about the budget when it comes to Helene. He said, we must prepare to fend for ourselves. And we're probably seeing a little bit of that now. So. All right. My headliner is non-newsy. It's about North Carolina and I guess tourism and locals and everything else. After living in North Carolina for, I think I've been here 20 years now, and then the 2 years as a kid in Fort Bragg, I had never been to Old Salem, historic buildings, gardens, and everything, even though I have a lot of family ancestry there. My great-grandmother went to Salem College, a lot of relatives buried out in that, I think it's called God's Acre Cemetery. And that coffee pot was in front of my great-great-something-father's Gersh store, which we had this photo of, and then went and saw the actual coffee pot. So that was really cool. My mom was in town. It's her side of the family. So we went and checked all of that out. And Old Salem is really cool. If you haven't been there, it's just right outside downtown, like very, walkable. There are some stairs. So if you have mobility issues, you can keep that in mind for some of the buildings. But it's just a really cool place. It's something I've wanted to do for years, not just because, of my Moravian ancestry and everything, but it's just a cool North Carolina thing. So if you haven't been, encourage you to do so. And I will note that there is that House bill again this year to make the Moravian Star the state star and the Moravian cookie the state cookie. And everyone jokes all the time about, that there should be cookie samples when they move that bill. But it's something the House likes to do, but the Senate, says no, as usual. Let's hear a lot of things. So.
Was the House that voted on the bill to make Andy Griffith the state TV show?
That seems like the very House thing to do. Yeah, I can't imagine that the Senate would.
They had the police car from the show out front, right in front of the legislative. Yeah, I think that might have been lost in the maelstrom of everything else going on.
Yeah.
But right out front, last 2 weeks ago, I think.
I think it kind of tracks with the vibes in either chamber that the House is more, I don't know, a little more lighthearted and enjoys things more than maybe the serious Senate. So
I remember them bringing popcorn during the budget vote in 2023, I think.
In the House?
Pretty sure.
Well, definitely. I was in the Senate.
No, not the Senate.
No, very formal there. Well, I don't know. We'll see what happens in the Senate this week. Maybe they'll surprise us. So, all right. We are out of time. I'm Dawn Vaughan with Avi Bajpai, Kyle Ingram, producer Laura Bajpai. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Sign up for our political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.